Okay, great. Good afternoon to our audience. Thank you for joining us, and we are looking forward for our awesome evening as we understand the impact of domestic violence to our children, mental health, and positive parenting. All right, thank you for joining, and I trust that it will be meaningful for you to share in this evening proceeding. Before any further ado, we will stand to the national anthem. Thank you. We will start our evening by putting God first. So let's pray. Father, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for the panelists we have here with us. We thank you, Lord God, for the online persons. We thank you for our audience indoor. Lord, we thank you for such an awesome privilege to be in this fashion as we learn of the impact of domestic violence to our children, mental health, and walked away, mighty God, with the understanding of how to parent our children effectively. Lord, we thank you for an awesome time as we trust in your word. In Jesus' name, amen.
Bless them.
Ms. Rose will share with us the objective of the Kiwanis Club.
Can we stand? All right. Our objects are sixfold: to give primacy to the human and spiritual rather than to the material values of life, to encourage the daily living of the golden rule in all human relationships, to promote the adoption and the application of higher social, business, and professional standards, to develop by precept and example a more intelligent, aggressive, and serviceable citizenship, to provide through Kiwanis clubs a practical means to form enduring friendships, to render altruistic service, and to build better communities. And our last object, to cooperate in creating and maintaining that sound public opinion and high idealism which make possible the increase of righteousness, justice, patriotism, and goodwill. Thank you.
Thank you. I am the moderator for this evening. I'm Camille Cornwall Graham. and I am a counseling psychologist. Uh, the host for this event is Anne-Marie Bishop, who is also an attorney and the president of the Kiwanis Club. She also has an office in St. Anne in Portmore, where if you need any legal aid, you can contact her and she will guide you. With us this evening, we have our DP, Miss Dillon. My apologies, Jacqueline Dillon. And the gentleman here with us this evening is Kevar Jackson. And I have Miss Bloomfield as well with us, who will be sharing the impact of domestic violence on our children, mental health. I must apologize for one of our presenter, the principal of Ascot. He had a family emergency that he has to attend to. The others, they are on their way and they will join us. Thank you so very much for listening as we ask Miss Dillon to share with us what is domestic violence and how is it impacting our children.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. We talk about domestic violence. Oftentimes, we think about physical violence. Physical violence is the end stage of domestic violence. It begins with the emotional. We have the psychological abuse. We have the financial abuse. We have sexual abuse. All of that. So we're talking about domestic violence. We're talking about any form of violence. The sole purpose of it is really to exert power and control over a victim. Domestic violence happens in the context of family, and it happens in the context of intimate partner relationships. So you'll find domestic violence among family members, mother and child, father and child, cousins, blood relatives. You'll find domestic violence among persons who are related through marriage, persons who are dating, persons who are ex-partners. Also, we have another category that oftentimes we do not pay attention to. It's persons who reside in a household and is dependent on the perpetrator. So you'll have a caregiver. And although that caregiver is not related by blood, they reside in that family, a part of that family, dependent on the perpetrator, and oftentimes are caught up in the middle of domestic violence situations. So those are the categories. We talk about domestic violence.
Thank you for sharing. And we're going to be looking at some of those as we go through the evening proceeding. But I'm going to ask each person just to introduce yourself and give us a little of your understanding of the impact of domestic violence. And then we'll go back to you with the questions and just understand a little bit more about the different types of domestic violence, the sexual, the physical, and you named some of them earlier, and we're going to come back to those. Yes, Kevar, let us hear you.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Kevar Jackson, the Dean of Discipline at the Marcus Garvey Technical High School Junior Campus. So I have the students who are from 7th grade to grade 9. Domestic violence is a monster that sadly is a part of what we do, and it's a part of our home, sadly. And in my case, I have students who would have been exposed to domestic violence, and how they respond to it is, some case, different. I have some students who are very docile, very reserved, so they don't necessarily see that is happening. Then you have some students who are a little bit more outspoken, who will come and tell you that this is happening at home. But the major challenge I would have faced is that because this is happening at home, and home should be the place where a child should feel most comfortable to express him or herself. And when that trust is broken at home, you can understand how difficult it may be for him or her when it comes to the real life school setting, where there are students from all over the world, all parts of Jamaica, and they are now stuck in a space where they have to express themselves. Many may not be able to do so, and because they can't do so, they struggle with things like fighting, conflicts, because the home would have not prepared them adequately to deal with these challenges when they get to school.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am going to borrow a definition from the UN website on domestic abuse. So, domestic abuse, also called, and I'm quoting now, also called domestic violence or intimate partner violence, is basically a pattern of behavior in any relationship that is used to gain or maintain power and control over an intimate partner. Abuse comes in the form of being physical, sexual, emotional, economic, psychological actions or threats of action that influence another person. So basically, domestic abuse or domestic violence, as our officer said, has to do with exerting that control over somebody else. And it's usually in a demeaning way. Sometimes we focus, when we hear the term, we think primarily of physical, a physical abuse. But that's not necessarily the case. As we've heard, it can be financial, can be sexual, it can be emotional, being derogatory to somebody else, In terms of the influence on children, the influence is really bad, very debilitating, because you find that children now, they become aggressive. They, as our counselor, as our dean said, they may become passive, just subdued, as we would say in Jamaican parlance, cow down, There's another side to this, though, that we don't often speak about, and it is very important. The impact of trauma, being a traumatic event many times, the effect of trauma on a child's brain affects their development. When a child goes through trauma, certain hormones are released, just like anybody else, adult, child, whomever. Cortisone and adrenaline, those are the hormones that are released. And when that happens, the growth hormones, they stop or they pause. And so what you find is that the whole thing of the child being able to reason and the thought processing and so on, it doesn't happen at the level that it should, because the trauma affects the child's ability to reason. That's how trauma affects the brain, especially the young brain. Yes? And so you will have a child who may be 15 years old, but when they go to school, they can't function because of the trauma. The brain functions at the level of, say, a 10-year-old. And the teacher may look on the child and say, or the community or the parents, and say, but this picnic dance, when in fact the child is traumatized due to the domestic violence. So it is really not a good, thing for our children. And two, they also learn. They are learning, because they are in this environment, they are learning to be abusive very often.
Thank you so much. Ms. Dillon, you spoke a little about the different types of abuse and the impact. Tell me a little bit more. As an officer in the field, and you would have been associated with different intervention, tell me a little bit more of what you're seeing out there.
All right, from where we are, as a JCF, we interact with schools and communities. And what you'll find within schools is the kind of behavioral problems that oftentimes we say the pitney them bad. But they are going through some form of trauma, so they will become bullies, they become withdrawn, they will take smoke, they will smoke, they will drink, they will just act out. Some of them form gangs. And so over the years, one of the things as Jamaicans we fail to understand is this. In every household where a child lives and there is violence, that child is affected by the violence that surrounds them. When you have domestic violence incidents where a mother and a father, for example, get themselves into this kind of situation, and if a boy is there, he's going to want to defend his mother. So if the father is the aggressor, that boy is going to step in the middle. And what we have seen is boys intervening, and we have had an incident where a young man was shot by his father, having intervened in a domestic violence situation. We have had young ladies who support their fathers, where the mother is the aggressor, and they step in to defend the fathers. So what we have not, as a nation, pay attention to is that when children are affected by violence, it plays out in different forms. And as police officers, we have had to take a step back and look at how we engage young people, especially when we have to go into the schools, because this is what we see. I've been doing a number of youth empowerment programs, and some of the behaviors that are displayed, and when you have one-on-one with young persons, they will say, well, this is what happened in my home. I have a 15-year-old who said, my father says the only way I'm to control a woman is to lick her up. So I have a girlfriend, I'm a lick her up. And it was something that we saw at a program that we had where this young man hung on to this girl that he said is his girlfriend, and he just never liked how she stood up talking to another boy, and he decided to beat her up. So children will display varying behaviors when they are affected by violence, more so violence in the home. Again, the home is supposed to be a safe space. When the home is no longer a safe space, then children will gravitate to anywhere that they can find safety and security. And many times, what they gravitate towards is not necessarily healthy for them. And we have a number of children. We often talk about mad people, and we think that mad people are people who walk up and down and talk to themselves and them look dirty and present a particular way. But we have a lot of children in schools, in communities, that suffers from mental health because of traumatic experience out of domestic violence.
Thank you. Dean of Discipline, tell me, what is happening in the schools?
Well, the thing I've come to realize is that it's not new, because I've oftentimes I'm hearing of persons who are a bit older than I am that these kids are different. I don't think that they are different, but what has happened is that they have these things. And because they have these things, they are now exposed to information that at their age I would not be exposed to. So when the home is struggling, students oftentimes find spaces on the internet to seek support. And the internet is like this. It feeds you what you want to hear. So what I've come to realize, especially with students dealing with trauma, many of them are now cutting. And when you sit to ask the question, where did you learn this? Sir, upon TikTok, I see it. My friend told me about it. Because cutting was very taboo to me until I was close to my 20s. But they're learning this at 13, 14. And because the kids are now exposed to information that, like I said, at their age I would not have, many of the parents are not able to help them because they no longer trust them. And because I don't trust my mother, I'm not going to tell my mother how I feel. So like the officer said, I'm going to find some friends, and my friends and I will now form a gang, and we're going to deal with things how we think is fit. But the part that is most concerning that I've seen in my 10 years of teaching is how much the girls are now becoming the perpetrators. Many of the incidents I would have dealt with in the last 5 years, the more serious ones, are happening with our girls. And there's a fairly common theme among most of them. They are without a father. A father should be the first person that should love his daughter without anything behind it. Pure, honest, genuine love. And because the fathers or the males in the home are abusing these children, many of them are now seeking it from somebody else. And sadly, many of the boys they tend to find it from are not necessarily looking for love. They're looking for other things. And because they're looking for other things, you may find a girl at 20, even 16, she would have had sexual intercourse with close to 10 different men because she's in the hunt or for the search for feeling a place of belonging. So these are some of the things that I have been seeing. But like I said, the cutting is becoming very rampant among the, well, I'm even seeing it in boys, and that's also a little bit taboo for me as well.
Thank you for sharing that. So I'm hearing domestic violence in the home, it breaks the family.
Yes.
And because the family structure is broken, you find that the girls or even our boys are gravitating to outside source for safety and for love. And as Ms. Dillon shared with us, those places or persons may not necessarily be the healthy or safe place as they might have thought. And I'm also hearing from you that in the schools, you're finding a lot of persons, especially a lot of girls, who are now being involved in cutting and self-harm in different ways, different forms, because of the trauma that comes out of domestic violence. So I'm hoping that our audience online are listening, and I'm trusting that in the next segment, we'll also hear how we can help our parents to be more effective in parenting so we can avoid the violence, the trauma, the cutting, the strain, the gangs. All of that can be stopped if we understand how to conduct ourselves as parents. But let us hear a little bit more from Ms. Broomfield.
Okay. In terms of further how this plays out, you know, all of us used to do intake. We now have the National Children's Registry, which is a part of the CPFSA. I remember when I used to do intake, parents would come to us and they would say, "Me want him go farmatory." And basically they were saying they want to put the child in a child care facility, usually because the child is acting out. And normally when you question the parent, when you have that discussion with the parent, you know, you ask the parent to step outside, you have that kind of discussion now with the child, and you begin to trace what is really happening, what is bothering you, what causes you to behave like that, you know, and usually you find there's some dysfunctionality between the parents, yes? You find that happening a lot. You also find sometimes that children manipulate the dysfunctional relationship between the parents. And so, you know, if they want something, they want to go to a fete at school or something like that, they will say to one of the parents, you know, let's say daddy will allow them. So they will say, "Daddy, I can go to the fete and so on." And daddy will say, "Okay." And they will go straight to mommy, who does not want to be on daddy's wrong side, especially if there is domestic violence. "Mommy, daddy say I can go to the fete." They're not asking mommy, you know, and the parents are not consulting. So they know how to manipulate situations, Yes? Um, you find a lot of things happening. Children, as we've heard, they act out. They don't feel that love. They're not living in a loving environment. And so they do what we call acting out. We just look on them and say them rude. They misbehave. They're not, behaving like nice, decent children like how we raise them. But yet still, the parents will not necessarily understand how the dynamics between the parents, that poor relationship, the domestic violence and abuse, they will not necessarily understand that it is impacting the child. And that causes now the child to act out badly. They will act out in school, as we have heard, because, or even in their community, because they would have learned that if you have a little disagreement, or if you just don't, you want to exert power and control, it's not even so much about conflict management. It is really about showing that you have power and control. And so they learn certain things from home. And so when they go into a classroom, they are the ones that end up being the bullies very often. They bully other person's children. And so it's like a ripple effect. They have relationships, and they must be the one, like a little Don. They are the ones leading the group, but they're not leading the group in any positive way. Usually, it is just a pattern of deviance. And so, it is really like a ripple effect where you find, children are so negatively affected by the domestic abuse. So one of the things, if I may steer us a little further, is one of the things that we may do as an agency, Child Protection and Family Services Agency, is to provide parenting skills training. Yes, as one of the interventions for this. Because many times, I'm not saying all the time, but many times when parents or guidance counselors refer children to us, when we check it, there is an issue with the parents. Usually, very often. And so we provide parenting skills training to the parents, and we also do intervention with the children.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we're going to be looking at, we have a full understanding of the impact of violence. We spoke about the trauma. We spoke about the symptoms that follows, the self-harm, right? We spoke about the different types of abuse, domestic abuse, right? So we're going to be looking at how can person, you're in that situation at home, and you're saying, help, I need help. I need to know how to deal with this, how to solve my issues, how to solve the problem without getting the children involved, without hitting my spouse, without physically and verbally abusing. So we're asking the panelists to help us to know how to get it together so our audience can be aware of the alternatives moving forward.
All right, so
I think one of the things persons need to be aware of, and I'm going to look straight at the camera because I want persons to hear this and hear this well. When it comes to domestic abuse or domestic violence, it is something that is likely to escalate in terms of frequency and in terms of severity. And it's like a cycle. Yes, if we try and understand it, there is a cycle. So at one stage, the perpetrator or the dominant person will flare. And another time, they calm down, they cool down, and they overcompensate, and they're the sweetest person ever. And so the victim, and I'm sorry to be labeling, but usually statistics show that usually the perpetrators are the males. Sometimes it is the ladies, but usually it is the males. Eh? Am I correct, officer? Unfortunately. I'm not bashing men, let's get that clear. Because you have some really lovely, lovely gentlemen. I believe most of our men, Jamaican men, are good men. And I'm trusting, I'm believing that most men don't do that. But in situations where there's domestic violence, usually the perpetrators are the gentlemen. When we talk about intervention, the victims have to bear in mind that, yes, there's a cycle. So the perpetrator will come fierce, fast, furious, vicious, in whatever the format or it takes. And then after that, they're sweet. And so there's a level of conditioning that takes place because persons will say, then she an idiot, why should I leave? It's not that simple. It is a mind game that's going on. And the victim goes through a process of being conditioned. They are getting accustomed to it more and more and more, and they are getting, as it were, more helpless emotionally. And so that fight, all of us have a little fight in us. No matter how calm or passive or so a personality is, all of us have some fight in us. If you rub us the wrong way, we all have some fight. However, the person who is a victim of domestic violence, that innate defense mechanism is eroded. It's being eroded, it's being eroded, it's being eroded. And so in their thinking, you know, they don't think as logical as somebody else looking in. And they don't have that fight necessarily. They don't have it. Yeah? Unfortunately. And so the person in the situation may find the inner strength to decide what it is that they need to do because it will reach a stage where somebody is seriously harmed or somebody can even die. And that has happened. So they may find the inner strength to you know, put things in place, you know, insist whether they're going to insist the person goes through counseling or they just leave. Or it may mean that persons, the community, family members, other persons who are observing and recognizing that something is not right. Last week, you know, wifey had a black eye and she said she walked up in the wall. And this week she has a broken leg and is a stone, a block drop mysteriously out of the sky on her leg and break it. You know, whatever. There are many different signs, not just physical. And so it means persons may have to kind of intervene for the sake of the victim. And it's not just the spouse who is a victim, but the children in that environment are victims. So a report might need to be made, or they may need to pull the victim aside and say, what's happening? You know, we need to care. That is what it is. Not just in terms of feeling the sympathy down here, so, but to actually take some action to help.
Thank you. So you're telling persons who may be going through a domestic violence situation, a broken home, to speak up, speak out. Don't keep silent. There is help for you. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes, there is. And even if the person, we want any person in that situation to reach out for help, because usually you need professional help. But if the person is not at that stage, there are other persons very often who know what is happening and they turn a blind eye. Because we say, but look, if she call the police, you know, by the time the police come, is you know, them lovey-dovey again. And so we say, but she's stupid. We don't business here because she don't have any sense. And so persons need to get beyond that and to care enough to make reports to the relevant authorities, the relevant agencies. There's the police in terms of children. There's the National Children's Registry. That's the arm of the CPFSA. Yes, and that number is simple, 211. Or the other number is 888 Protect. Make a report. You might not be able to go in and assist, but there must be somebody somewhere who can, so make a report.
Okay,
May I say something?
sure. Feel free, go ahead.
I have sat and I have listened, and from another hat that I wear, and having had to deal with youngsters, I have found that some of, you call them our victims, they want to leave, but they can't. Because, or they think they can't. Because, for one thing, financially, they are not stable. And so, if they were to leave, they probably have nowhere to go. They don't have the community support or the family support who will help them and give them an opportunity to start life all over again. The other thing, and I found this when I started working, the children, those persons that I met who came from broken homes, divorce or something, and who had to start, the children had to start life all over again. And this particular type of life was of a lower standard than what they were accustomed to. And so they would blame one particular parent and say, look where I used to live and you have now taken me into a two-room. And I'm not accustomed to that. And so we have to understand where these persons are coming from and deal with them in such a way that they are able to say, well, probably your mom had no choice. And I'll give you an example. When I was on the university campus, I used to sit on the undercroft in the nights waiting on the bus. And I remember a student who was a mother, I think she was also a teacher, and the lady was so crestfallen. It's not that her husband was beating her or anything, but he withheld the economic support. And she couldn't deal with it anymore. He was psychologically abusive and all of that. And the lady found somewhere in Portmore to live. I'll never forget it. And her son, who was younger than her daughter, was the one who was adopted. Her daughter complained bitterly that she wants to go back to her father. She didn't understand. And the level, the life that she was accustomed to, living up in uptown, and you have taken me over here into a two-bedroom where I have to share a room with another sibling? No. And so what you find is that some parents, especially the mothers, are very reluctant even though they're going through all of this abuse. They are so reluctant to break up this family unit, especially if the children are not seeing that side of the father. Because he will beat her in the bedroom. And the children do not hear. And in front of the children, they are the best couple you could find. So this domestic abuse, it's not as simple. It affects the children so badly that when you meet them, you have to know how to deal with them. And it's not that easy to deal with them.
Thank you
Not
so
that
much.
easy.
Thank you.
I would like to say something. I listened. There are three dynamics at play in domestic violence: love, fear, and hope. Three dynamics always at play. When you speak with somebody who's a victim of domestic violence, there's always the word, I love him or her. If I leave, where am I going to go? Who's going to take care of me? One of the deadliest form of abuse in domestic violence is emotional abuse. That coercive control, those threats, when a perpetrator beats down a victim and reduces them to nothing, that person stops believing in themselves, stop believing in what they can do. I have a survivor. He's not even a survivor as yet. Still a victim. Going through the process of helping her to become a survivor. For 26 years, she has been beaten and battered by a partner. To the point where, to cope, she developed what we call selective memory. So she remembers the good things, but she block out everything else in order to cope. Secondly, the girl is beaten every time something goes wrong in that household. The perpetrator beats the daughter and says, because of you, I am beating your mother. It is a difficult process in the context of law enforcement for victims of domestic violence to seek help. Oftentimes, they are more sympathetic. I'm not using the word empathy. They are more sympathetic to the perpetrator's cause than themselves because of this series of abuse and threats and coercions. And so I'm going to speak in the context of the Jamaica Constabulary Force because that's the organization I represent. We having, over the years, look at how victims respond, especially to law enforcement when it comes on to getting assistance when it related to domestic violence. We had to start we had to move away from traditional policing. And we started the DVI care centers. We had to do that because we had to create a space where victims feel safe and secure, feel that whatever they say is in confidence, know that if a child comes, we're going to listen. The first case we got were two children, 7 and 9, came and asked for help because the mother and father had to kill them one another and they don't want to live without the parents. So imagine a 7 and 9-year-old walking to you, the police, to say that to you. So children, we often ignore them and we only pay attention when they start to act out. And I'm saying there are so many organizations now that offers help in the form of counseling intervention, in the forms of shelters, in the form of assistance to the court, that a lot of victims are not aware of. And I'm happy I'm on this platform. So I can tell you, apart from the police through the DVI Care Center, they are the court. The law says the court has the authority to grant protection and occupation order, or a combination of both. The problem with us as Jamaicans is that we're afraid for our courthouse because we say, oh, I don't want to be bogged down by the court. It's not a bother. It's not a bother to save your life by going to the court and ask for protection order. Although if the perpetrator is really, really determined, we have to put other systems in place. The Bureau of Gender Affairs operates 2 national shelters. They may not be able to take everybody, but they are there. Women Inc. offer shelter. There is the Caribbean Coalition for Vulnerable Groups that offer assistance to victims of domestic violence. The problem is persons do not know where to go for help. So let me tell you where you go. Contact a domestic violence intervention center or call 224-4274, and you will be directed to one of these agencies because they are our partners. The Ministry of Labor offers some amount of assistance to victims of domestic violence. Not many Jamaicans know that. And so, whilst I understand fear, where victims of domestic violence is concerned, I understand blame because children, when they are used to a particular lifestyle, they make it difficult when there are situations and they have to come out of that old, the lifestyle that they are so accustomed to, and go into a new one. Problem solved if we start to talk to our children. We have not been effective communicators, parents. We forget that we can no longer put them in a corner and tell them, sit down over there so nobody must hear them. We have not been talking to them. We have to talk to our children. We have to tell them what is happening. And you're not blaming anybody, but you have to tell them that this is the situation that you are now faced and you may have to change your lifestyle for safety and security. They are no fools. They understand. And
Yes,
even if they are angry at the beginning, if you talk to them and reason with them, they will understand. Parents hide up things too much because we say we don't want to put them involved. That's the problem that we have when it comes on to these situations within the household. I don't want my girl to hate her father, and I don't want my son to hate him father or his mother. So this is between two adults. You must talk to them.
Yes, I agree with you. Bear in mind, communicating and helping the child or children to understand what is happening doesn't mean that you want them to take side. Because that's where the problem is. When a parent talk to a child with the motive of having that child taken aside to say, look at your papa, and him caused this, then that's where the error is. But parents need to understand, as Miss Dillon said this afternoon, sit down and have a conversation with your children. Help them to understand what is happening and what is the way moving forward. What's the solution? How are we going to cope in this? And of course, they will hear, they will listen, they will understand. As she said, there are no fools. And I'm sure those children who are hearing will agree with me that you understand what is happening, right? Even though they're trying to play a pretty face in front of you. Yes, you understand clearly.
And it would have to be age appropriate.
Definitely.
While we are communicating.
Definitely age appropriate, but I can tell you, even the 2-year-old, I have a 2-year-old. And if something sound like, it's a, stop your noise. I said, no, we're just having a conversation. Stop your noise. Stop your noise. That's his way of saying he doesn't want any cursing, and there's no cursing going on. We're just having a conversation. For some reason, we get excited and we raise our voice a little. To him, he's shouting. So they understand.
If I may say.
Yes, please.
And it seemed like the SP was reading my mind over there. It seems that way, because what I found rather interesting is that many of the students who would have come to speak with me, I'm hearing things about home before their parents. That is telling me that there is an issue with trust, or they are not confident enough to speak about it to the parent. And if a child is doing that, there's a problem. And when parents don't spend the time to communicate effectively with their child, age appropriate or not, just communicating with them, you then put them in a position now where they're going to go somewhere else to share the information. And that information, because the children at my school, they don't oftentimes know how to filter information. So they grab it and they just tell everybody. They don't understand that this could be something to me that is very personal, and I don't want the world to know. But because I trust you enough, I'm sharing it with you. So when parents create these avenues where, imagine, my child is not talking to me, his parent, it's an issue. So I'm encouraging parents, don't let the dean of discipline know about your business before you. Don't let the guidance counselors know about your business before you. Sit and don't, like the SP said, there are no fools. And because the internet is so open to everybody, and parents are not necessarily taking the time to teach a child what to sieve or filter on the internet. They will take information as raw as raw as it is, and do what they understand in the time and the age are with it. So parents, if you don't teach them how to, they're going to find other sources to teach them how to, and sadly, in many cases, it's not the desired outcome we'd want.
Thank you.
Can I just wrap up with his point?
Sure, go ahead.
As parents, sometimes we fail to understand that children are very perceptive. We fail to understand that children feed off our own emotions. And sometimes they know what is going on, but they're waiting on somebody to sit them down and have a conversation. I have an 11-year-old, and anything change in my household, my 11-year-old will go to his aunt and say, something is not so right with mommy, You think I should ask her? And I can tell you, before the aunt answer him yes or no, he's right at my door. So mommy, tell me something. We have to understand that our children, these children are like us when I was growing up, these children will tell you that they have a voice. So as parents, we have to practice active listening. That's what we need to do. Active listening. Teach them that they too have a voice, and that whatever happened in the household, they are a part of whatever decisions that needs to be made. You see, if you ever give them that kind of confidence to talk about situations within the household, you'll be surprised that when something goes wrong, they probably will tell you before you tell them.
May I make
Yes.
a comment based on that?
Yes.
I also have found out that we have to be observant as adults and look at the pattern of behavior of some of our children. I mentor a young man, and I noticed that he was always late for school, for work, and I had to carefully say to him, why you always wake up late? And one day he said to me, I have bad dreams at night. It keeps me awake. And so I play my games in order to survive the night. I don't drop asleep until X, and I have to get up at Y. I didn't press until sometime after, because if they close on you, you can't push. And I learned not to push too hard sometimes. And eventually, it was the same thing at home. He was somewhat abused if something happened, and somebody else did what they perceived he did. And so his grandmother would just push the door and hit him while he was sleeping. And so I've had to be very careful how I open the door sometimes, how I speak with him, and try to get him to realize that you're not in that space anymore. And therefore, you can sleep as much as you want. Try to go to bed. See how much you can get some rest. But as practitioners, we also have to be careful of the survival mechanisms that we tell these children to practice. Because it was somebody in the field who told him to go watch video games without actually delving into the real issues that cause his problem. So we have to be observant, and we have to be careful how we deal with the children who are coming out of some of these broken homes. And that is why, as Kiwanians, we have embraced the motto, serving the children of the world, and kids need Kiwanis. Through the clubs that we have, we go into the schools, and we are seen as aunts and uncles, grandmas, how we deal with the children. We have a mentorship programs that we have are on bullyism, teaching the children how to spot a bully, how to notice bullyism, what the different types are. And we have just finished one with some of the clubs in Portmore where we say to them, enough is enough. Go and speak to the teachers, go speak to your parents, and let them know that, hey, this is what is happening, and we are not going to continue with this in our space. So we give them a safe space to meet, and we allow them to communicate. Because guess what, Soup? Forgive me if I get your title wrong. If we don't communicate with the children and teach them how to communicate, they will be there hurting, and you don't know that they are hurting. Because they don't know how to come and say to you, Auntie, this is what happened to me last night. I saw mommy and daddy fighting, and I couldn't sleep. And you see the child sitting in the classroom, and they're not paying attention. And eventually, because the grades are so low, you think that is dunce, them dunce, and them not dunce. Them just having a moment.
May I say something?
Sure.
You know, as my sister here shared and the other panelists, I want to emphasize that, you see, school is so much more than the academics. Because in the school environment, that is where a lot of things can be identified and have been identified. So teachers, guidance counselors, the deans of discipline, the principal administrators, you know, they play a very important role in recognizing when that something is not so right with a child, you know. And I would encourage persons who are part of the education system not to just, I know a lot of professionals are burnt out and frustrated and so on. But in spite of that, I would encourage you to care enough if you notice something arise, something not so right with a child. Pull the child aside and kind of explore what is happening. You know, because not every child, they're troubled, but they may not be brave enough to reach out for that help. You know, I'm emphasizing it this evening because that is the reality of a number of persons. Yes? To go to somebody and to say, a 15-year-old, to go to somebody and say, you know, my mother beat my father last night, or my father boxed down my mother, or, you know, mommy controlled the money and daddy have to quit. That takes a lot of bravery, you know. Yes. And the child is there in a lot of turmoil and they cannot function at school. And so I'm encouraging us, if we notice something that is not going right with a child, pull the child aside and explore a little more. You may just be saving a life.
Thank you. Joining us is Miss Tomlinson. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate your presence being with us today.
Thank you very much.
Sure. And we have been diving into domestic violence and its impact upon children. And we are now looking at parenting skill set. So Ms. Dillon shared with us that we need to have effective and active listening, right? So we need to communicate to our children. And we shouldn't think of them too small to help them to understand what is going on, because they're already aware of what's going on. It's just that they need us to come and talk with them. Can you kind of share with us, just introduce yourself a little bit more and share with us the different ways that our parents need to be guided in helping our children deal with these trauma so that we can have productive children?
Okay, so ideally, good afternoon, everyone. Ideally, what we would want is that we'd like to have a home where there's no conflict, right? But we know that in our society, wherever we are in the world, we're going to have personalities that are going to come together, and those same personalities that loved each other, boy love girl, girl love boy, there's going to come a time when there's going to be some level of discontent or discord, and I want to not being able to manage that kind of disagreement sometimes, and sometimes it's not even a disagreement. Just the way how something is understood by someone can cause conflict in the home. Once the child is I first of all recommend that when there is conflict, as much as possible, that conflict should be dealt with not in the presence of the child. First of all, the children are going to, if you might say that the child is not understanding, which is one of my panelists said, that we oftentimes think that even because they're young, they're not understanding. But children understand mommy's emotion. They understand when they see you cry. They understand if they see you sad. And they understand if they see you quiet. And they understand shout. And they also understand manipulation. So when dad and mom is at a point of disagreement, it's always recommended as best as possible that those disagreements are resolved, are dealt with, not in the presence of the child. However, we all know that oftentimes that does not occur. So what I recommend is that whenever there's a disagreement, that the child it is explained to the child what happened in the most age-appropriate way, as she said, that is possible. It doesn't mean lying, because the thing is that in homes where there is domestic abuse, it is not a one-off situation. So if you say to child, oh, mommy and daddy today was just having a little conversation and turned heated, but child sees it happening tomorrow, next week, and there is physical interaction in terms of hitting and so on, that already the child is not going to trust mom because mom said it was a one-off situation. Now the child is seeing it as a repeat action. So if there is discontent, I suggest we explain to the child what is happening. Mommy and daddy is trying to go through this situation that we're processing, and we have a disagreement about it, and we haven't resolved it as yet. All right? So child understand, oh, mommy and daddy was talking about this from last week, and the child might even say, daddy, mommy, you still haven't spoken about this before? And it is best we encourage parents all the time. We know in Jamaica we say, don't get nobody in your business, right? I call those things lies and myth and facade. Because when you get a hit or a thump, or the child start to act out, people are now going to get into your business. So I suggest that if the issue seems ongoing, it's not being resolved, get some help. Not only are you hurting yourselves, but you're hurting your children. Because they're seeing this happening every day. And children who live and see abuse, it's going to affect them later on. So the quicker you can get some outside help for the situation, you know, this culture of see no evil, do no evil, leave people business alone, it's what it's killing us, both in crime and also in our family setting. There's no perfect parents. We are going to disagree at times. But what we need to also do, I encourage community centers, churches. We need to have more social engagement where we talk to people about how to manage conflicts, how to deal with situations. Because, you see, a lot of families are faced with economic hardships. I mean, in COVID, we have persons who got laid off. Sometimes it's the main breadwinner. But mom could be still demanding, oh, you know, the light bill need to pay, I need to do my hair. They're still demanding stuff. And sometimes dad, and it happens both ways, will become overwhelmed and say to you, you have to cut your coat according to your cloth. The things that we used to do, we can't do them anymore. But sometimes one partner is saying, oh no, we need to do this still, and this needs to happen. And sometimes they're not willing to compromise. So conflicts are stirred up by all kinds of things. And so it is for the social agencies, like some are doing now, to continue to engage parents. We can't give up. we have to continue engaging them and engaging the kids as to how to survive some of these situations, because they're real and they continue to happen over and over and over. What we're ending up with now is a lot of damaged kids. You know what? I saw a parent, and this is how children reason. A mom and a dad were having a conversation, but they were talking loud to each other. And the child said to me, my mom and my dad are fighting. So I thought it was, face to face or so on. So just processing that, this child sees every conversation that rises above a certain temperature as fighting. You understand what I'm saying? So imagine if they argue like that all the time. That child is going to grow up saying, you see, my parents, basically they've always been fighting. We need to sit with our kids and say, listen, mommy and daddy, we disagree about something sometimes. And as we are talking loud, we're not fighting. It was good for me to hear that word, because fighting when processed means physical abuse and stuff like that. So we have to listen to them, we have to engage them, and we have to create spaces like Sunday school, help to talk to them about some of these things, because a lot of damage is going on in our society, both as a result of the social occurrences, economic hardships, and so on. And the child oftentimes becomes a victim.
Thank you. Sure. Thank you.
All right. I appreciate the comments, and I agree wholeheartedly that we need more forums like this to empower persons in how they live in their family lives. I'm going to have a different opinion on one little thing, though.
Sure.
You see, when it comes to parents having a conflict, I believe that the children should recognize, or they should be aware that there's a conflict going on.
I do agree.
It is how the conflict is managed,
Right.
because you see, the children are learning, and in the future, they will have,
They need to know
spouses,
how.
and they will learn based on what they have taken from their parents, how to deal with the conflicts. So I think children should be exposed to some of the conflict, not the full extent and not everything, because conflict is part and parcel of life. It's just how we deal with it. There's a healthy way and there's an unhealthy way, So I think to an extent they should be exposed to when the parents are having a conflict and the resolution of it. Because if it's in a healthy way, then they will know there doesn't need for anybody to thump over anybody, or anybody to withdraw certain privileges to try and control somebody else. And so instead of the dysfunctionalities being perpetuated, they would have learned a healthier way to deal with situations. And, our society later on would look much better.
Thank you. Yes, Miss Dillon.
I am in agreement with both of you. But from where we sit, there is what we call danger to safety protocols, how we educate family members around domestic violence and what it is they ought to do when there is a conflict. And part of that danger to safety protocol speaks to educating children about what is happening within the household, developing codes that they can alert persons if that conflict escalates, teaching them not to intervene in physical conflict for their own safety. And so if you don't talk to them from the beginning, they will not know or be able to identify that moment when it is going to escalate from just words to physical to death. So the danger to safety protocol that was developed by the United Nations speaks to having communication with children so they have a clear understanding of what they are to do when there's a situation within the household that is likely to escalate beyond just words.
Right. Yeah. The thing is that in most Jamaican families, because what we're just doing is that we're juxtaposing abuse with parenting. And for the most part, that little middle ground where we now says, okay, it has reached that boiling point where we now need to excuse child, really never, hardly ever happens. You see what I'm saying? So I do agree that children need to understand that there will be conflict in the home, and but that is usually in a good moment where we can sit and instruct them. But once there's a conflict, because you don't know where it's going to end, sometimes it's best not to overexpose them. Because children are overexposed to violence in the home. When they get in the schools, the guidance counselors can tell you, they pick a fight. They are disruptive because they feel like they are in this zone where they too need to be defensive. And not all the children will be like that. Some will just become very withdrawn as well. So not every child who is exposed to abuse is going to be disruptive in terms of fighting and so on. But they can also become very withdrawn. The thing is that what we need to do, as I said earlier on, is just continue to educate parents on conflict resolution, domestic. Sometimes when you hear the reasons, I was waiting on a friend of mine to go to a funeral of a common friend, and I didn't see her coming. And I called her after the funeral, and I said to her, "Where were you?" And when she showed me a photograph of what happened to her, and this was just a simple question that was asked of her, and she said something, and the next thing, she had a fat face and a swollen lip. All of this happened in front of her child, and because it is a repeated action, her child, who was an A performer, has totally regressed. Totally regressed, because this has now become a habit in front of the children. So I am really very passionate about just trying to avoid this, because the victim in these cases is the children. And we already have a situation on our hands as it relates to hostility in our society. And if we're looking at a generation that is being, coming up in this stream, it's serious.
Yes, thank you so much. You shared with us, Ms. Broomfield, earlier that we should find a way of dealing with the issue. And I heard again Ms. Tomlinson saying prevention, find a way of not letting it escalate. How? Because the people need to know how. What can they do? Because they see this thing is happening, and it's happening, and it's happening repeatedly. What can they do? How can they prevent it from escalating, from it to become severe, for it to come death, all of that? How can we prevent it? I'm asking the panelists.
A victim has absolutely no control over a perpetrator. They cannot determine at what point, not easily determine at what point a perpetrator is going to escalate from words to a big fist to a big thump anywhere. They have absolutely no control over the action of an abuser. However, again, it goes back to communication. And I like to tell people, sometimes we have to learn to run. Sometimes persons need to take for themselves, because you cannot control when something is going to happen. You must know the signs. At what time, at what point does my abuser start to abuse me? Know the signs. So if I put on a dress and it feels saying I look good because somebody else is going to see me, am I going to get a big thump? If something happens outside and he or she comes home and don't get the kind of response that they think they need to get, is it going to result in domestic violence in front of my children? So again, know the signs. Know what you're willing to cope with. You have to know your breaking point. And whilst we sorry for the perpetrators. Victims tend to sorry for the perpetrator and then can't bother. And them just want somebody to know that this is happening just in case. Victims need to develop a safety plan. Know what is it if I have to run, where may I go? And nobody else must know except somebody who I trust.
Okay, I heard you. This person you met, for argument's sake, as we know in the Jamaican context, majority of the time, the women are the victims. Most of the times. Say you met this man and you're living together and you're having a good time. This man wants you to carry him to all the family members. He wants to have contact information for everybody in your family. He wants to know where you go on a Sunday evening. Monday to Friday, he wants to know what time you get to work, what time you leave work. I heard you mention signs. So I want to hear, are there more signs for us for our audience to be aware how to identify abusers?
Well, you're ready to go? What we know is that it is personalities play a very important role. The research will tell you that persons with narcissistic personality, borderline personality, and another one, I can't remember it right now, are more vulnerable because they are very controlling, right? And because they have this sense of they're always right and they know everything, as soon, because one of the main causes of domestic violence is disagreement, all right? So if you have a personality type that says, I'm always right, and I tell you to do this, and you did not do this, because a lot of times persons don't understand that when you're in a relationship, it's not parent and child, you know. It's adult and adult.
That's correct.
But many persons who are in adult relationship respond as if it's adult and child. Did I not tell you this? Did I not tell you that? That's not how you speak to another adult. So can you imagine when you have someone who is in a relationship with somebody who is just as controlling and demanding as another person who is controlling and demanding? And when you recognize that you have those two personality types who says, I am right and I'm not taking this from you, you're going to end up somewhere, right over there by her. And that is, a lot of times, that is what happened. You understand what I'm saying? So I say to people all the time, you know, when you're getting into relationships with people, the cute, the 32, 28, 48, those are physical features. The biceps and the triceps and so on, those are physical features. What you have to interact with is personality. What kind of person is this? What kind of man is this? How does he relate to his mom? How does he relate to ladies? Get to know her. Get to know him. Because there are also men who are being abused. It's just that the men, most of the times the men's ego will not cause them to come and report it. But some men are getting some hit and some thumps too. You understand what I'm saying? So abuse is not one-sided. And I want us to just understand that the numbers in Jamaica are very high. The research says 1 in every 3 women is abused. So it's serious. So we want to say to young people out there who are getting into relationships, try to spend some time to get to know who is this man. Has nothing to do with academia, does have nothing to do with his ability to speak nicely. Get to know more about him before you commit yourself to these people. I'm finished.
Can I balance something? Because
Sure.
I don't want our men viewers out there to think that we are talking about women only. We have over 2,000 men, 8,714 reported incidents of domestic violence last year only. Of that, we had 2000 something, can't remember the exact figure out of my head. We grow our boys and we stereotype them before them born. We tell them that they must be macho. We tell them that men don't cry. We tell them that if they cry, they're a sissy. What you find happening is that a lot of women are now perpetrators of domestic violence. However, because everything that happens, we run out first and ball out, we appear a lot of times to be the victims. But from the police perspective, when we do our investigations, oftentimes it starts with the woman, then we fire big box and lick and do some things, you know. So, whilst more women are reporting, it does not mean that there are more women who are victims of domestic violence. And studies show that. It is just that the men are afraid to speak up about being victims of domestic violence because they will be labeled. And this is what is happening with our boys. They get into some unsafe relationships and the girls call them all kind of names and beat them up and them just suck it up. So I think for us, as persons who work actively with victims of domestic violence, is that we have to ensure that people know where to go for help. There's a national helpline, 552-0372. It's 552-0372. There's a national helpline. When you call, you're a social worker, and there's a line for men as well, but I can't recall it out of my head just now. But if you call that number I just gave, if you're a man, they're going to direct you to the man, the person on the other end who will treat with the matter. If you're a woman, then you speak to a woman. For the JCF, we have no gender, because we can't have gender. So we have to deal with both types of victims. But domestic violence has no gender, and so we have to recognize that a lot of our men are hurting silently, and it right back to our boys.
Thank you for that.
If I may say, because I am the only male up here.
Please.
And I can speak from my experience, because I would have experienced, not necessarily domestic violence, but I would have experienced lapse in how I was raised, because my parents are from that school where children are seen but never heard. I don't think the country on a whole makes enough effort to assist males. I don't. And like the officer rightly said, men are oftentimes stereotyped based on what they believe, how they dress, how they look, how they speak. Because if I speak well, I am practicing some other things. If I dress well, I'm practicing some other things as well. And a lot of this starts because, one, homes are heavily female-based. Fathers, in many cases, are absent. And in my time in school, I've seen where the students who are from homes with both parents, they're a bit more leveled in terms of how they make choices, how they view themselves, things like that. So I'm begging. Men, I am begging. It is only cool to say I've helped my children to your friends. That's the only time it is cool. But children need fathers. And I think especially our females. The boys, I think we eventually will get it. But for a girl where there's no father, it can be difficult. Because, Madam Officer, just imagine, if you have a daughter, hypothetically speaking, there's no father. She would have never experienced love from a man. Never. And then this young boy at school, him cute, him have the bicep and the six-pack, and him talk sweet. And he come and whisper all kind of sweet, wonderful lyrics in her ears. That is her version of love. And when that is her version of love, and he's not at the place, I would have gotten enough, so I'm tired of her. She would be a place where she's now broken again. And then the next boy come, him here a little bit straight, and him skin a little bit lighter. And he whisper some sweeter music. That's now too. And when kids, like I said, especially females, are not exposed to what genuine, authentic love is from a man, we create monsters. Because for me, like I said, I'm seeing a lot of cases where girls are my perpetrators. And it's frightening to see that many of my major incidents are girls. But when I sit to see what's happening at home, mom is too busy and there's no man. And mom have the baby father over there, or the stepfather. And they're really not talking to the kids. So the kids are never at a place where they're comfortable, safe, where they can tell how they feel, why they feel. And they come to school and stress deans out and teachers out when they're really not trying to, but they don't know how to deal with what they're facing. So again, gentlemen, saying you have a dozen kids is only cool when you're speaking to your friends. In reality, it's not. It only hurts your daughter repeatedly and create them to be little monsters that I don't think we'd want for them. So if you're thinking about a child, be ready. And not talk about because a friend has trouble, you're on a gelding truck. Because that's not the case. You need to be at a place where you're able to, one, money will come because money happens in cycle. But your daughter needs somebody who she can sit and share emotions with and not think about anything else but the care and the well-being of her child or her well-being. So dads, spend some time with your daughters.
Active listening, building relationship, spending time with your children. These are some of the things coming out this afternoon in being effective parents. So we're wrapping up, panelists. And we need our parents, we need our family at home, our family in our audience to be aware of being effective parents and how to exercise effective parenting so that our children can feel safe and comfortable to come and sit down and tell us the issues, the situations, and we, being the parents, to guide. So I want us to give our final remarks as to being effective parents so we can prevent and we can help our children in their growth and their development. Go ahead, please. Thank you.
I implore all parents to be active listeners. Just spend some time and allow your children to speak openly, honestly with you. Build that trust with them so that they can speak to you about anything that is happening to them. So for me, active listening is what I'd implore all parents to get to practice with their children.
Amen. And parents, I would encourage you because even as a dean of discipline, there are days at work where it feels like a bit much. And thankfully I have a wife who is able to sit and listen to when I have my many problems. And she provides just listening here for me to vent. Many parents are trapped in relationships where they can't speak to their partners. But I encourage you, find somebody who you're comfortable with or feel safe enough with when things are a little bit much. Instead of taking out on the child, your partner, talk to somebody. Because talking to somebody oftentimes release that pressure and it helps you to make sounded choices where you won't find yourself hitting a child or starting an argument with your partner. And it's also active listening because we need somebody to speak to sometimes. So just find somebody and speak with.
If I can go next, I would just implore all parents to see how best we can create a safe space for our children. A space wherein our children can speak with us in confidence. Because nothing breaks a child than knowing that they came to you with something confidential and you broke their trust. Create a safe space. Find some time for your children, even if it is an hour or 2 hours per week. Sit with them listen to what has happened to them over the period of time and just hear what they have to say. And you'll be surprised what you are going to hear and what you're going to learn and how that is going to help the children to deal with some of the issues that they may have and to grow as individuals.
I would say, and I'm echoing some of what has been said already, before being a parent, choose carefully who you want to be your life partner. Look carefully at the person, please. It is not just a momentary high that you are, you're caught up in the moment and you move from step A to Z and the person is pregnant. No. Choose carefully. Is this person a friend, a confidant? Does the person respect me? Does the person love me? Does the person care about me as a person? Do I reciprocate? When you become a parent, do your best together to create a loving, harmonious environment where this is expressed, where it is seen, where it is felt, genuinely so. And thirdly, if you find yourself in a situation where you're in a dysfunctional marriage or spousal relationship, get professional help, especially if you have identified that there is domestic violence. Remember what I said before? Where somebody is a perpetrator of domestic violence, it doesn't automatically get better. It tends to get worse in terms of frequency and intensity. So get professional help. Reach out.
Thank you so very much. It was Matthew Jacobson who said that in every child who believes in him or herself, firstly, there is a parent who believes in him. And as we celebrate Child's Month, I want to say to the parents out there that the best inheritance, the best gift that you can give to your child is some time. Some quality time to listen to the said and the unsaid. Because children speak. They may not speak in the way that you want them to, but look at what they're drawing. Look at what they're listening to. What are they trying to say to you? All good gifts around us are sent from heaven above. We must recognize that being able to give birth to life is a gift from God. And we are going to give an account for how we nurtured that life, how we guarded that life that was given unto us. So if you're a parent out there today and you just thought, oh, wow, I just push out two, or because that's what we say sometimes, not recognizing the gift and the beauty of parenting, because there are many persons out there who are not able to give birth physically, right? So when you are able to nurture a life, see it as a gift from God and make the wisest investment of depositing love and kindness into that person's heart. And if every parent tried to do that, I am sure that the world will be a better place because of the quality of that deposit.
Yes, awesome. Thank you so very much, panelists, for a very interactive evening. And I'm trust that our audience are blessed, they are learned, they are informed. And I'm just going to ask the ladies to repeat the numbers so you can get help. Right, you can write this number down. Go ahead, ladies, with the number for CPFSA.
To make a report, if you know of or suspect a child is being abused, if you know or suspect that a child is being abused or exposed to domestic violence, you may make a report at 211 or 888 PROTECT. That's 888 776 8328. So the numbers to call to make reports to the Child Protection and Family Services Agency, the numbers are 211 or 888 protect, 888 776 8328.
For those persons, it might not be happening in your home, but you're aware of someone being hurting through domestic violence. Don't keep silent, because you too are accountable and you're expected to help in whichever way you can. So feel free to call the number given so that you can able to report so that the persons can get help. Go ahead, Miss Dillon, and share your contact for those persons who need to get to the DVI care.
To get in touch with the DVI care centers, you can call 876-224-4274 or 876-224-4275. To get in touch with the national helpline, you can call 552-0372.
Thank you so very much, ladies. Thank you so very much for listening this evening. Thank you, panelists, for an awesome evening. I'm grateful to be sharing this platform with you and to learn from you, and I'm very much grateful. Thank you for our hosts who have hosted us, the Braeton New Testament Church of God, and our dear Anne-Marie Bishop, who had put this program together. I just want to say a big thank you for the media team who had helped us along this journey. Thank you so much for our listeners, our audience. It's indeed a pleasure, and I'm so grateful to have you, and it was a blessing. Thank you so very much. Thanks again. Bless you.